All right. This is Attorney Matthew Newsom with Iowa Business Lawyer. And I have a friend and family member, an amazing creator, an amazing artist who came to me with a bunch of really interesting and challenging questions about the law relating to art. And so I want to introduce you to Annie. Annie, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Annie Goldberg, and online I'm known as Oil Painter Annie, and I'm a professional artist. I paint mainly in oils, but I also do painting in watercolor. I do mural work, I do illustration work, and then in my studio, I have a full schedule of private art students that keep me really busy too. So
That's great. And one of the things I love not only about your distinctive style, which I think is a very vibrant, colorful, energetic style, but also you are very active on social media. You do live streams of art. You do time lapses, which I think are one of my favorites to watch. And so you're creating a lot of original content, not just the paintings that you paint, but these videos and audios and other things that you do. Didn't you used to do some coloring books too?
yeah, I've done two coloring books actually. I did a shorter one that had 12 paintings converted to coloring books that was like a companion to an art show. And then I did a 100-page coloring book. So it featured 100 illustrated versions of 100 of my original paintings.
Wow.
It took
And
a lot longer than I thought it would, but it turned out great.
that's art, right? And I think one of the fabulous things is that you have the immense joy of this is your gig, this is your
Yeah.
full-time job. You get to do this for a living, and you're doing okay. So congratulations
Yeah, thank
on
you.
doing the thing that a lot of people dream about. Now you came to me with a bunch of questions, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to start and ask you a question.
Okay.
You might not think about being a lawyer as a very creative activity, but it is. It requires us to come up with creative solutions to problems. And I want to know, maybe this has never happened to you. I suspect not, that's not the case. But what do you do when you are out of ideas and you're not feeling very creative? How do you break a creative slump?
Well, I was just talking about that this week. One of the things that is really important for creativity in all professions, not just art, is rest. And I love my job, and my job is around me all the time. I have a studio, but right now I'm inside in my home office. There's art everywhere. There's art materials everywhere. And even when you're doing what you love, it's easy to overdo it and to just max it out. And I actually get my best ideas when I'm resting. And I keep to a pretty rigorous production schedule for creating my art and keeping up with deadlines. But on my schedule, every single day is rest. And I get the best ideas when I'm resting or kind of letting my mind just have open space. And when I rest, it's usually not TV. It's either a light nap. I try not to take big naps because it's a big time, user. But I spend a lot of time just sitting outside and looking at nature and letting my mind be open and taking a break from electronics, taking a break from thinking too hard, and letting my mind just kind of breathe. And I think I come up with the best ideas when I make sure to give myself that time.
So what do you do when you're in the shower and you get the eureka moment? Do you like write on the wall?
My husband does that. He keeps pens and papers everywhere. And I think maybe it's a different way of thinking for different people. Usually my ideas are really visual. So sometimes I will quick write a little picture, a little thumbnail sketch. My husband is always like, write it down before you forget it. And I'm like, it's burned into my soul. I'm not going to forget it. So it's just different people. So there are pens and papers everywhere in my house, and my husband's little notes. Some of them have my notes. And even if you don't remember where you put the note, I think the act of writing things down helps you remember it. But yeah, I do write it down, or, usually in my schedule, if I can just do it, then I just get it done and capitalize on the moment while the passions are burning.
That's great. And for our audience, your husband is also a creative person. He's an artist and designer, and
Mhm.
and shares a lot of he's a very creative person in his day-to-day work and in life. Well, let's talk about some of the thoughts, the questions that you came to me about, because I looked at the list that you had, and I think a lot of people wonder the same
Mhm.
things that you're asking about.
Well, it's something that's more recently come up in my professional life here, and it's mostly since I've started doing mural work. And I seem to have attracted two different kinds of customers with my mural work. And the first customer type is people that are coming to me because they're familiar with my art and they want something really recognizable as my art as a mural. And so that's really easy for me. The harder part for me can be when people come to me with an idea that's from either a different creator or Pinterest, or people find things, Google Images, or they can contain logos or maybe copyrighted materials. And I guess I'm trying to understand how you can create something for them, maybe in the style that they are looking for, and maybe use imagery that they're suggesting without breaking the law.
Sure, sure. And this is a hard question. This is a hard question. And as you were telling me about this when we had our email back and forth a little while back, I realized you've actually got several questions in that one
Mm-hmm.
question. And so on one hand, I think that one of the things you told me is somebody wanted you to create a design that incorporated like a Mickey Mouse head or something like that.
It was a lot of Disney, yes. We'll use, and I am very well aware that, you know, it's a popular, they want that kind of art in their homes and they want it on their shirts and hats and everything.
Well, one of the first things that I thought of in answering this is we should probably talk a little bit about the difference between copyright and trademark,
Okay.
because this is very confusing to people. In part because sometimes both can apply. But my phone was ringing. Um, your logo, your brand image, you might be able to copyright a representation of that. You might be able to draw, paint, describe that in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And each time you take this idea of a brand image and you put it down into some tangible form, then you have created something copyrightable. But this brand idea, this brand image can extend beyond things that can be copyrighted, like a couple colors together or the outline of the Mickey Mouse head.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that people associate with certain brands. And so those brands, if they're smart, will trademark them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can you can violate, misuse someone's trademark without actually misusing or misappropriating their copyright. And so, for example, if you were inspired by a Monster energy drink can and used their colors or the shape of their logo in something completely original, then
Mm-hmm.
you would not be misusing their copyright, but you might be misusing their trademark. A
Okay.
classic example is the green and yellow of those dumpsters that you see by Waste Management. They've
Okay.
actually, that's part of their brand, and if you use that in a way that's original, you still could break their trademark. So one of the things that these consumers of your art, these potential patrons, are asking you to do is to use someone else's trademark. And then another thing that they might be asking you to do is take a copy of a photograph that they saw and then paint it. I have to remember what the original question was.
Well, we're talking about using, certain symbols and certain requests that people have found off of the internet that they've sent it to me and said, "Can you make this on my wall?"
Sure. So if you're asked to create something that incorporate another brand, then you might be violating their trademark.
Mm-hmm.
Now, brands can be really fussy about their trademark, especially when they're kind of distributed out to the world in general. Sometimes they get upset if your brand is associated, or if their brand is associated with something that they don't like. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, if you took the Mickey Mouse logo and put it on a slot machine, they might object to that. Um, and so that could be
And
yeah, the brands really care about that. Another thing that's kind of brought in here is this idea of what is fair use.
Mm-hmm.
And are you familiar with that term? Have you heard it before?
I'm not really sure the difference between, fair use and inspired by.
Mm. Well, I'll just tell you, this is probably the hardest question in copyright, and I wish that I could give you a really clear answer.
Mm-hmm.
I spent about 2 weeks thinking about it. I even asked other people, and I said, "How do you address this with your clients that are creators?" I talked to mostly lawyers, and I got some really great feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that it's so hard to grasp. And so there is a test that does help us understand if something is fair use or not.
Mm-hmm.
But let me first explain what it means. And that is, you might have heard the musician Weird Al Yankovic.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes songs, music that other people wrote, and then he changes them and changes the lyrics, makes them humorous. And this is called satire,
Mm-hmm.
and or parodies, and that is generally considered fair use, because what you've done is you've transformed it from one thing into a completely other thing. And so one of the things that you look at is how much are you changing it. And probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think about that is, well, what if I change the colors? Is that transformative enough?
Mm-hmm. Or
I don't
like
know.
silhouetting, or you're not exactly using it the way that they've sent it. You've changed it or flipped it or silhouetted the image.
And I don't think that those things matter. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to be transformative enough.
Okay.
And so simply doing a silhouette or something is not going to work. Now, there was a famous photo of Prince, and it was on, I think, the cover of Time magazine. And a famous painter, Andy Warhol, painted it. He changed it a lot. He went from full color to a very flat looking image with
Mm-hmm.
just a few different colors. And I think there might have been a couple different variations of it. But it was still very clearly and distinctly a painting of the original photo. And it
Yeah,
took,
because he used logos in his art, and the Campbell's soup can, and photos of famous people.
yeah, he was a magnet for
Mm-hmm.
copyright problems. He really
Mm-hmm.
was. But this picture of Prince turned out to not be fair use
Mm-hmm.
because it was not transformative enough. And so simply turning it into outlines, flat colors, that's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take something to a completely different a different medium and a different audience, or for a different purpose, then that can be transformative. Here, I'm going to go to my notes because I wrote down a couple things to hopefully help.
Does it matter if you're using it, like if I were, does it make a difference if I'm making it in my own home for no money, or doing it for no pay or a nonprofit or something like that, versus somebody who's hiring me to do it and getting paid? Or does the location matter, if it's in someone's home or in a public place?
Yes, these things absolutely matter. So for example, if you want to go towards the more allowed methods of fair
Mm-hmm.
use, educational use tends to get a lot more freedom to use copyrighted works. And
Okay.
so, for example, in one of my law classes, we printed out examples of this and used it in the classroom as handouts. And if I did that of a book in a bookstore and started handing it out to people on the street, that would not be fair use. But in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, it is, because the purpose is to educate.
Okay.
Now, there are exceptions to that too, but generally speaking, educational use is considered more permissive,
Mm-hmm.
and less restrictive than, for example, on the other end of the spectrum is commercial. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you're doing something for money, then you're going to be much less likely to be permitted to use it under fair use
Sure.
purposes. And then also too, you kind of address several different things in there. The effect on the market and the effect on the work's value is a big deal. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, if somebody said, "Hey, I saw this decal at the Disney store that I could paste on my wall as a wall mural, but it was $2,000. Would
Mm-hmm.
you paint it for me for $5?" Then what you're doing is you just took $2,000 out of the Disney store's pocket
Sure.
and put 500 in yours. And
Mm-hmm.
so that would have an effect on the value, because they're losing money because of you creating a derivative work.
That makes
Uh,
sense.
but back to the transformativeness, that here's a quote that I got off the internet that was very, very useful and helpful to understand it. It's a characteristic of the derivative work that makes it transcend or place in a new light the underlying works on what it is based. And
Okay.
so, yeah, in internet stuff, let me just rewind actually for a second here, and let's
Okay.
talk a little bit about what copyright does. Copyright is there to make the world a more beautiful and enjoyable place.
Okay.
And so you might say, well, how does putting restrictions on art or creativity make the world a better place? And that is this: by allowing you, a creator, to profit from your art, then
Mhm.
it incentivizes you to create art and share it with the world. And so this world is a better place because you, Annie, and other creators make art and share it.
Mhm.
If you could never make money, then you probably would have been an accountant or something.
Not quite good enough at math for that, but something else maybe.
Thank goodness for copyright, because that incentivized you. You know what? I don't have to stare at rows of numbers all day. I can use my pens and paintbrushes and canvases to create beautiful things.
Mhm.
And musicians can use their voice or their instruments. Writers can use their words. And the world is a better place because now you have an incentive to share your creative ideas with the world. That's the purpose of copyright. And so if we make it harder for an artist to profit from their work, then we discourage artists from creating those works.
Hmm.
And so copyright is there to make it so that you can make money. But let's just say that you painted something and then you said, I'm never going to let anyone see it. And then you show it to one person and you said, you're the only one in the world that's ever going to see it. And
Mhm.
then tossed it into the fire or put it in a vault to be buried for 100 years. The A person who creates a derivative work of that might actually have more fair use um, permissiveness
Mhm.
than someone who takes a popular photo and creates a derivative work, because that person has taken something that no one was going to be able to enjoy
Mm.
and appreciate and transformed it into something new so that the world can benefit from it.
Sure. So, kind of what I'm understanding from what you're saying is, you can use people's ideas, but as an artist, it would be important to add my own message to it somehow, or my own voice or perspective to it.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with that one statement about, the what is the word that I used again? I thought it would make more sense to you than it probably would to me. This transcendent attribute.
Sure.
So, your new creation has to take it to the next level. I don't know, what does that mean? Do you understand what that means?
Yeah, I think it would mean, put my own spin on it to make it, um, like I said, an original instead of a copy, to put my voice into it, and what message do I want to say with what they're presenting and asking for. Well, what message can I add to it to make it different and transform it into a different, separate piece of art instead of a copy?
And that was one of the reasons why parodies and satire do usually qualify for fair
Mm-hmm.
use, is because you're taking one person's creative work and then giving it a whole new meaning, a whole new voice, a whole new perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that is allowed. Now,
Interesting.
interestingly, one of the things that matters less than you might think is how much of the copyrighted work you are using in your derivative.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, you can use a big chunk of something and it is very transformative, and so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
And then in other cases, you can use a very small piece of something.
Mm-hmm.
There was this famous biography of a politician that was written, and a small, only 400 words of it was quoted in a newspaper, but it was like so it basically disincentivized the public from reading the book because it was just the essential part of the book that was taken out of context. And so this was like less than 1% of the book was shared, and yet it was considered not fair use
Mm-hmm.
because they took something important away from the world by sharing that little bit. And
Interesting.
likewise, you're old enough to remember rappers in the 80s sampling songs, and they would
Yeah.
take a little bit. And those are oftentimes not considered fair use, even if they only use 1 second.
It does seem like in the art world and maybe music world, maybe not so much the writing world, but that people feed off of each other, and you kind of take one step and then you take the next step. And, some artists encourage, say, take my work and like musicians, take this bit and now you make a song out of it, and it kind of gets passed along, and they're allowed to do different things with it. And it's kind of, they've given permission to kind of be copied, but maybe copy's not the right word.
Well, that's touching on another thing that we talked about in our, or emailed back and forth about, is, what is public domain?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? And I don't remember if you asked it or if I asked it, but can you accidentally put something into the public domain? And so first of all, you are when you create something, when you take it from an idea and you put it into some format, you get the copyright. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. You have a copyright on it. If it's still stuck in your head and you talk about it with someone, that's not a copyright. You have to put it into some fixed medium. But once you do that, you don't have to do anything. You now have a copyright on it. And so that doesn't give you the maximum protection. Registering the copyright does, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we'll come back to that. But you can absolutely give up some of your rights. So as a copyright owner, you have a right to say you can or cannot create derivatives. You can or cannot publish this. You can or cannot publicly display this. You get to control those rights. And if you give people permission, like when you upload to YouTube, there's a little button there that says allow remixes or something,
Yeah.
I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, you give people permission to use little bits of your work in their own creations. And I think that's great. If an artist can still be incentivized to create great art and allow the public to remix their art, I love the idea. But what about public domain? And this is another fascinating rabbit hole. Public domain is something that is possible in some countries, but impossible in others. And so in some places in Europe, for example, you not only can you not accidentally put something in the public domain, you can't even purposely put it in the public domain because some of your rights simply cannot be given up. And I think this comes from the harsh truth that creators have historically gotten the shaft when it comes to protecting their work. But public domain basically means that I'm giving this to the public and they can use it without my permission, without attributing me. I'm basically giving up ownership of this. And you're disclaiming all copyright protections.
And doesn't all work go into the public domain after a certain time frame?
Yeah, it does. It does. And the laws have changed a couple times in the last 100 years. And so the length of time that something stays in your copyright does vary depending on when you created it. But yes, you do have quite a long time where you get exclusive copyright protection, and then it goes into the public domain. But you can do it earlier if you want to, but you have to do it on purpose. And Creative Commons has some really cool contracts that you can use. You can copy and paste them, and you can say, I'm going to share this under, I think it's called CC0. CC0 basically says, I'm giving up all my rights. And if you're in a place where I'm not allowed to do that, then I'm giving up as much as I can. And you can use it for whatever purpose. But I don't really suggest people do that, not creators. I think a better thing to do is to use a license. Have you ever licensed your work?
I haven't, no. The closest thing I've gotten is, just asking people not to reproduce my work without my permission, and trying to kind of spell out, especially in mural work, what is allowed and then what is not allowed. Like taking pictures of the mural and putting it in your brochure is allowed. Taking the mural graphic that I sent you and putting it on a t-shirt and selling the t-shirt, then I ask if you can please ask permission before doing something like that.
Sure. Out of curiosity, how would you feel about a band recording a music video in front of one of your murals and then putting on YouTube and making money on it?
As far as my understanding, I might just have to feel neutral about it. I always request that people credit the artist when it's when it makes sense, when it's able. But when something's out there like that, you can't really control who takes a picture in front of it and what they do. And especially, it's not on my property. It's kind of a weird balance between, like, I created the art, but I don't own that building. I don't own the property. It's meant to be photographed. It's meant for people to stand in front of and look at, so I don't really know if that were to happen. I've heard from other mural artists that they've been contacted and asked, because their mural was going to be in a TV show or a movie, and asked how they wanted to be credited or anything. I'm not sure if they were asked if they could do it, or if they were just, hey, this is happening, sort of thing. And I don't know if a person can expect any kind of payment or royalties from a situation like that. Hasn't happened for me yet.
Well, an artist, photographer came to me just last week and asked me if they can take a picture in front of a mural.
Oh,
and the
interesting.
answer is that the mural artist still has the copyright. And so when you paint a mural, you still have that copyright, and that means you can limit its use, and you still have the right to control some of these things. And so those artists that you've talked to who were approached and asked for permission, that's the sign of somebody doing it right, because
Good.
that is the right thing to do. And there's been lawsuits where a TV advertisement in front of a mural was liable for copyright infringement. And so the copyright artist said, hey, I don't support this. You had to get my permission and you didn't.
Yeah.
And it's cool that you only ask for attribution. You would be within your rights to ask for money, but you don't have to.
Well, the outdoor murals that I've done, we kind of created them from the beginning to be a place for people to take photos in front of. So it was kind of, I knew from the beginning that was something that the customer wanted. And, they want people to, it's in a park, so they want people to visit the park and use the mural to enrich their experience at the park. So knowing that ahead of time, kind of what they planned for, was very helpful.
Sure. Yeah. And that's good. That is good to plan through those things. One of the copyright issues that we see some people deal with is when they have somebody design a logo, which I think your husband does that kind of work, right?
Right. Yep.
And the odd thing is that it depends on the language of the agreement between the artist and the brand that's commissioning it, who owns the copyright. And the default is, unless you agree otherwise, the artist maintains the copyright.
Sure.
And so if a artist ever came to you or your husband and said, would you design me a logo? If they didn't agree otherwise, then he still has the copyright to those.
Sure.
And we actually work with sign companies because they will want to make a sign for a building, and they have to get permission from the artist, not the business, to use the logo on the sign.
Yeah, it's not something that's come up too much for us, but I think we usually kind of discuss with the person what they're going to use it for, and make sure that, we give them the permission that they need, and charge accordingly for what they're asking for. They're going to put it on shirts or just their website. That makes a big difference.
That actually is a really good point to bring up, and that is the easy way to stay compliant throughout all of the questions that you asked and that we've talked about. The easy way to stay compliant is to get permission from the artist. So if in doubt, ask the artist for permission. And I have seen many times the artists have said, oh yeah, sure, absolutely, no problem. And sometimes they want payment, and sometimes they say no. But the vast majority of times they say, sure, it's okay, go for it. And so asking permission is the way to keep yourself safe when you have a question about, can I use this or not?
Sure. Now, does the stuff posted on social media fall under that? Or is that kind of a free-for-all? Because I've had people using my image, pictures of me, like on a poster, which seemed a little strange to me. But they just went to my Facebook page and took the picture and used it.
Well, the internet is the Wild West, and a lot of the questions that we went back and forth on email about, the answer is most of the times the infringements are too small.
Sure.
And so it is technically inappropriate to use these things in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, taking a picture that you find on the internet and slapping a quote on it or a poem or something on it,
Sure.
right? That is technically infringement. And
Sure.
if the copyright holder wanted to enforce their copyright, they could. They could. And in fact, I've dealt with clients who found pictures on the internet and they
Mm-hmm.
used it for their business social media or business website, and the creator sued them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes these things come through in a funny way. They come through as a demand letter. You
Mm-hmm.
owe us $1,500 or 20, and it looks like spam, and so
Mm-hmm.
people ignore it, or sometimes they see it and say, "Is this legitimate?" And then if they ignore it, sometimes it goes away, and sometimes it goes to court, and
Mm-hmm.
then it tends to be a lot more expensive. And that actually brings up a good point. We should talk about how to protect your copyright to get the
Sure.
maximum protection.
And
Do you
protect
have?
your own work, and yeah, protect my personal artwork.
Yeah. So the right way to do it, first of all, is to take your idea and put it into some fixed form.
Mm-hmm.
Paint it or draw it or whatever. And once you do that, then registering it with the U.S. Copyright Office. Have you ever done this before?
No, and like, would an artist have to register every painting, or how would that work?
Yes, you would probably want to register every painting because it gives you the maximum protection. And the misunderstanding is that you still have copyright even if you don't register.
Mm-hmm.
So it is your idea, is your creative expression. You
Mm-hmm.
have the copyright on it. Registering it simply makes enforcing it easier.
Okay.
And it is not free. But when you do this, then if somebody misuses your copyright, you can sue, and it can be as little as $750,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be a lot more depending on the use.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you suddenly woke up one day and found everyone in town was wearing T-shirts
Mm-hmm.
with your photo or your painting on it,
Mm-hmm.
and you had registered the copyright, you could possibly sue them for every dollar they made.
Interesting.
Yeah, and more even, and more. And sometimes we see copyright trolls, and they do this. They take pictures and they post them on the internet, and they don't put any copyright statements, and so people unwittingly think that they're free to use, which is
Mm-hmm.
not true. You don't have to put copyright
Mm-hmm.
Annie on your painting to get copyright protection. It helps, but it's not necessary. And then people use them, and then they just wait. They keep an image search. They have Google searching for the images that they registered, and then
Mm-hmm.
when they see a business, they sue them. And
Sure.
$30,000 is not unusual for those things.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen other artists putting watermarks over their artwork and, like you said, a copyright on them. The problem I have is I feel people can very easily crop it off. And putting a watermark over your art, it makes people. It's harder to share. It kind of detracts away from, you get words on it, and it would be a detraction from the art, which I understand it's not as protective, but I don't know that there's a great solution to protect yourself if you're putting your stuff out on the internet. I mean, you're putting it out in a very public space anyways. I get asked that a lot. What would I do if I found someone had copied my art or took a picture and did something with it? And I'm like, well, if I was really severely worried about it, I wouldn't be publishing anything on social media. There's
That
obviously more
answer
benefit to posting on social media than there is worry for me.
that answer does make me a little bit sad. So maybe there's a little bit of a tear in my eye after hearing that, because I think that it is reasonable for creators to
Mm-hmm.
expect people to respect their copyright,
Sure.
and so it is okay. I mean, I like your perspective, and I think that your willingness to be out there in the public
Mhm.
has helped you because it's made more people aware of the great art, and
Yeah.
that's allowed you to get more commissions
Sure.
and sales and murals and such. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think overall that philosophy is working well for you,
Mm-hmm.
but also too, it is okay to expect people to use your things in an appropriate way. Registering the copyright is one way to do that. Let's see, a watermark is merely just a hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to use your stuff, they'll use Photoshop to
Right.
take out your watermark, and that is what it is. The copyright, putting a copyright on it, it just helps people know who to contact if they want to do things right, and if they don't want to do things right, they'll just ignore the copyright.
And I seem to see it everywhere. And when I was working with the client with their requests that they had sent me, a lot of the images that they had sent me for inspiration were from Pinterest or even Etsy, people that were actually already selling art or handmade items with copyrighted stuff on it. And I questioned in the email, how is this? I mean, it's all over. If you go to Etsy, it's everywhere. There's hundreds and hundreds of people doing it. And I was like, well, how do people not, how are they all not getting in trouble?
Usually it's because the artists have simply been overburdened and chosen not to pursue them. But artists do sometimes come to me and say, Matt, I'm not okay with this. What do I do? And the good news is that U.S. law in particular, and many other countries' laws, are very favorable for artists. And so we will sometimes do what's called a takedown. We'll send a letter to Etsy or one of the other companies and say, this person, this example here, is an unauthorized use of copyrighted material. And the website usually has to respond very quickly. And so they'll do the takedown request. Sometimes that will cause the person whose material was taken down. So you might be the copyright holder, they're the unauthorized copier. They'll go back to Etsy or whoever and say, no, they're wrong. And then Etsy will put it back up. And so it's kind of like shifting the burden back and forth. But as the copyright holder, you're allowed to do that. And those takedowns are pretty easy to do. A lot of people can do that on their own. And, of course, you can have an attorney like me do that. The registration process, I think, is valuable. And so I would suggest to you and to other creators to strongly consider learning how to do this and doing it. So, for example, I'm looking behind you, and there's that picture of the purple mountains with the blue sky. And it's such a great picture. Yep, I love that one.
It's available, Matt.
Is it? Well, I just think the color combination is just so energetic, and it just, I don't know, it gives me joy to look at it behind you there. And so, you could snap a picture of that, a good quality picture, and register it. And then if somebody ever, maybe they downloaded this video and took a little screenshot of that picture and put it on a t-shirt, that would give you recourse against them. And it does cost money. And the fee to do it yourself, it depends. It can be as little as about, I think, $55 to do it. And then what you can do is you can work with people if they want to use your creative work, that you can license it to them. And you can say, I agree, you can use it on t-shirts, but not hats.
Yeah.
Or only on socks. You can use it on socks. Or you can set whatever rules you want. And then you do that. That's actually how educational material is often protected. Because if you created a coloring book for schools, and they might say, well, for educational use, we'll just make copies. But you could create a license agreement saying, I'm going to license this to you. In this agreement, you agree that you will not make copies. And so then you use contract to supplement your copyright protections.
How can I check if something is available or copyrighted? And we went through this, if you remember, with my peace polls a few years ago, because I did get a letter that I was using something copyrighted that I didn't know was copyrighted. And as a certain phrase. And how can people, is there a way that you can check that certain words or logo? How can you check that it's copyrighted?
Yeah. I'll just say the sad truth is it can be quite tricky. I was watching a YouTube video, and a person had found a piece of pottery, and they flipped it over and they found the artist's mark. They put a little impression in the pottery. And I guess those things, it's often not a name, it's just some unique symbol. And so they were asking around to find out who the creator of that pottery was. I don't remember why. And so it can require some diligence if you want to use someone's copyrighted work. I generally encourage artists and creators to make it as easy as possible, sign it. And do you put your name on your pictures?
I actually put my initials that I've turned kind of into a little symbol, but that's a difficult part, I think, for artists, because sometimes putting your name really big on it especially if you're not a well-known artist, will prevent people from wanting to buy it because they don't want this big word on the front of their painting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an interesting dance for, there's even some galleries, which I don't agree with, that don't want you to sign it on the front. And, you know, for me, that would be a deal breaker because all my paintings are signed. It's small, but, you know, I sign my artwork for sure. But, you know, it's kind of a funny dance between, if you're someone that wants to sell a lot of work, you know, well, you want to make it recognizable, you want it to be known that it's yours, but you also don't want to create something that will detract from people purchasing it.
Absolutely. So the way that I see people doing it often now is they will do a Google image search,
Mm-hmm.
and then that way they can find other instances
Sure.
of that photo online, and it is really good.
That's
I'm
it.
surprised at how good it is. You can have a small, funny, skewed, you know, just segment of it, and Google can oftentimes find, oh, this is from this,
Yeah.
and maybe that bigger version is still not the original source, but then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can kind of trace the breadcrumb trail back to
Sure.
where it came from. So this is always going to be a problem. Registering with the U.S. Copyright Office is another option that you can do, because then
Mm-hmm.
people can search there if they choose to.
Yeah. Well, you helped me with the other situation get through that very well. And that was actually a positive. I don't know if you remember, they contacted me about using their copyrighted phrase, but then they also gave me an opportunity to be a registered artist and use their phrasing with permission. So that worked out really well.
That is cool. And I see your peace polls now and then, just, you know, in the funniest little places. Every once in a while you see, oh, there's one of her peace polls. Well, let's see. What questions did we talk about but we didn't get around to do?
Oh boy. I don't know. I feel like we've covered it. I feel like we've covered it, but out of order.
That's fine. One of the things that we talked about, and I don't remember if we really answered the question or not, but you asked about, you know, recreating something similar to another artist's work, but for use in your home, for personal use.
Sure.
And this is, I think this is a very common thing. And the nature of this question, if you said, Matt, what's the lawyer version of this question, is it fair use for me to create a non-commercial version of this artwork, of a derivative of this artwork in my house? And the answer is that it may or may not be, and you are probably not going to get in trouble for it, simply because they're not going to have people knocking on every door, searching people's houses for illicit uses of copyrighted material. And so it'll probably be fine. But the fair use spectrum, the more transformative it is, the more likely you are to be permitted. The more commercial it is, the less likely you're to be permitted. If you're taking money away from an artist or a licensee through your copy, then you lose your protection. So it is a balancing act. And I really wish that fair use were easy, but it is a very complicated system, and there are no short versions, short answers to it.
Sure.
Well, what should my audience know about how to find you and how to learn more about your art?
Sure. Well, my website is oilpainterannie.com, and from there you can see a whole mountain of my artwork, find out anything about my peace pulls or my pet portraits, and also find links if you want to connect on Facebook or Instagram as well.
Excellent. And we'll make sure that the audience has links to that information in the video description. So you can find Annie on social media. She's extremely, she posts a lot on Instagram and Facebook and other platforms. And it's fun to watch her paint. It's captivating, in fact. And so, so look her up, follow her. And then also, if you have topic ideas or questions that you would like me to discuss, please reach out. I would be happy to help the business community, the creator community, learn how to leverage what they have better, more effectively, and to succeed. Annie, thanks so much for meeting with me in this interview.
Thank you, Matt.
Bye-bye.